everybody. This is my first Zoom call of the morning, so I'm quite wide awake, David, over here. I'm happy to start. Welcome, Daniel and Emma from OnBrand. New to the chamber as well. We're delighted to have them on board. And also we have Rebecca from Cleveland, Scott, York, and also Emily. And today's webinar will be discussing why it is important to think of your business as a brand. Please note that the whole webinar will be recorded and there will be opportunities at the end for questions and answers. However, during the webinar, if you think of something and you're worried that you will forget at the end, then please just put that into the chat function and we can raise that at the end of the Q&A. Both presentations can be sent to you afterwards. So don't worry about making notes. We can send that to you after, as well as forwarding all the contact details so you can make contact. One thing I would say is whilst we're on the Zoom call, do obviously make a note of people's names for LinkedIn, because that's what we're trying to encourage lots of people to do now, is use the LinkedIn function and communicate that way. So I won't chat for much more because we're on a 45 minutes. So welcome, Daniel. He's going to start the presentation.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen. I hope that the technology works for you. And hopefully you can see that. Excellent. I'm going to give you a whistle-stop tour and a quick talk through about brand and brand building. During this, we've only got a short period of time, but hopefully during that course of time, I can flick you through a little bit of what we're going to talk about today. Today, we're going to talk about branding your business and start off really with what is a brand and looking at how we can define what your brand is, why that's relevant to you, and how understanding whether you are a brand, what a brand is, can impact positively on your business. First question's really some logos there for you to mull over and muse over there. Hopefully most of them have first-time recognition for you. And obviously the first question we're begging is it a brand? Are these logos a brand? And is a logo effectively a brand? Couple of tricky ones. Second one in on the first line is Bacardi. Moving along to the black horse being Lloyd's. You'll probably find that you'll know the rest of them. Second row, Bic is the pen in the middle. Pudsey Bear on the fourth row. And the bottom second one in is Linux, which is often the one that throws people out. So there we go, a little reveal for you. If you want to have a little fun quiz in the office, then by all means download these after. Perhaps it's a font, and that's the question. And what we've done here is put together the font names that a number of brands use and then a line underneath, which effectively gives you a little bit of a clue as to who they might be. So talking about Addicted to My Shoes, that font you may well guess. Straight down to I Am, the AM there being the clue of a luxury British car maker. Buying and Selling With Me, the car in front, very fashionable, is a well-known magazine, and hopefully you'll have no difficulty looking at the Disney font below, and there's the reveal of those brands. So often you can recognize a brand by its font. Perhaps a brand can also be identified by its tone of voice, the way that it communicates with you, the way that it talks. This particular brand is Virgin Mobile. I like very much on the bottom that they like cheeky wit, and they draw the line between innuendo, smutty and too sexual on one end, and on the other side not having bad puns, dad jokes, or being too cheesy. Slightly different, of course, is Coca-Cola. Very positive, they're very friendly, and very down to earth. Starbucks express themselves by being functional, but yet expressive. And lastly, Harley Davidson. And as you can see, the whole tone of voice there is very strong, confident, and aggressive. I don't think I've got a long enough beard yet to own a Harley Davidson. I'm working on it. Moving forward, perhaps a brand can be identified by how a brand sounds like. There's a very strong, powerful piece that music can do. In having recognition of a piece of music brings you a very strong brand association, and that can give you some power. I'll leave you no guesses as to perhaps how these 4 notes have defined a brand by clicking on the example. If you're all now wondering whether breakfast time is over and it's time for lunch, that one, of course, is McDonald's. That's the iPhone ringtone, as you probably come to recognize. And perhaps this one, which I'll leave you with, which Rebecca's going to talk about shortly. If you haven't guessed, that one is not Frosties, and the Kellogg's, they're great. It is MGM's famous Raw, which Rebecca will talk about a little later. That didn't work. Apologies. That worked very well in practice. There we go. Perhaps it's a word. Perhaps words within mainstream culture have got. If you have a look at the lyrics here, you can quite easily see we've got "Bye Bye Miss American Pie, drove my Chevy to the levee." Her mind is Tiffany twisted. She got the Mercedes Benz. I think I'm in high fidelity, first class traveling set, and I think I need a Lear jet. If I move forward, there we go. Hopefully that's just, there with me a second. There we go, we're back. Excellent, good. So in terms of defining a brand, the brand for us really is about the emotional and psychological relationship that you'll have with your customers. Having a strong brand increases your chances of someone choosing your product or service over someone else's. Having a strong brand will help you attract more customers at a lower cost who are perhaps willing to pay a little bit more and purchase a little bit more often. We can see brand really is a powerful way to create that bond between you and your consumers, which will lead to a power and profit beyond what the product alone itself can achieve. And that's why brand is important, because it's a transformational business tool that can create a competitive advantage for you. So the ideal space that your brand wants to be is obviously in this gap here between what consumers want and what your brand does best. And the easiest way that you can think about this is to define your target audience by your brand assets and understand who your customer is. If we layer in an extra circle there of what your competitor does best, then I think what you find is that we've got 4 zones here. We've got clearly the winning zone, where what your brand does best matches what your consumers want. You've then got the risky zone, which is effectively where you either have to win within speed or emotion and innovation because it's overlapping you and your competitor. The losing zone, where your competitor meets the needs of your consumer a lot better than you do. And the dumb zone, we call it, is the area where effectively both you and your competitor do as good as each other. And for those reasons, it's a bit of a battle where the customer doesn't particularly care. One of the other ways that you can usefully define your brand is perhaps within 7 seconds. Apple, Special K, Starbucks and Rolex here do this very well. Apple makes technology so simple that everyone can be part of the future. Special K, inspiring women and empowering women to take control and maintain their healthy body. Starbucks, creating that personal moment and escape from hectic life. And Rolex, with its attention to detail, being a sign of prestige and success. It's important for you to think of your business and your brand in those ideas. And if you can create and understand what your brand is in that 7-second moment, then you can organize your brand messages to be understood and remembered. And if we take that a little bit further and take that one step further, almost to the elevator pitch, can you define your brand in 1 second? And I think pretty succinctly, those brands have done that very well there. So if you can narrow your brand down to 1 word, then certainly you've achieved success. So if I say to you, Volvo, hopefully your response will be safety. And if that's what comes up in your mind, then the brand has very, very powerfully succeeded, in what it wanted you to achieve. So today's customer journey is, of course, really complicated for people to buy, really complicated for brands, and there are lots more touch points now involved in those conversations. So whether in traditional terms that used to be going into a store or doing a telephone order, we've now got peer-to-peer recommendations, we've got Trustpilot, we've got call centers, we've got people using the internet whilst they're shopping, we've got social media. There is a much greater mix of content, obviously, and choices for influencing behavior. Why does that not move forward? Bear with me a second. Slide advance. There we go. So the big idea, and if you can centralize your business around one big idea of what you stand for and what you deliver, you can bridge the gap between your brand and consumer. And why this is important is that every aspect of your brand experience and your brand piece contributes to the overall running of the business. So your brand promise will connect ideas and separate you from your competitors, and therefore dictates your positioning. Your brand story can be used to create the difference between yourself and your competitors and move your consumers, which feeds into your advertising, marketing, and comms. If you're able to keep your brand fresh and atop by innovation, it will lead to product development. And the purchasing piece will move your consumers through the buying system and obviously lead to your sales. And around that, if you have a positive brand experience and you consistently over-deliver on that promise, then not only can you impact your own internal operations and culture of your organization, but overall. And therefore, it's important that if you define your brand and understand who you are as a brand, you can align and inspire everybody who works for your brand and your team. And obviously, what's it all about? It's about acquiring and retaining customers. Our last survey that we did of consumer research came up with this particular statement, which we found pretty profound. About these days, a reflection on society of time being valuable and people being able to move very quickly from brand to brand, choice to choice, of people just not necessarily realizing or being able to be time rich. People are not time rich. So if you're looking to acquire more customers, certainly fish in the right pond. It's really important that you start thinking about something called customer personas, which is who your audience is, who your customer is. Do they fall into a particular demographic? Are they a certain age, or do they live in a certain place? Are they on a certain mission? Is there some commonality between these customer personas? And if we can get some commonality, we can write some customer personas, and they help us think about purchasing and the decisions that you may want to make in your business by understanding their behavior. It's worth knowing, of course, that you need to look after your existing customers because it costs 5 times as much to acquire a new customer as it does to retain one. And these days, with social media, with engagement, with newsletters, there's some brilliant opportunities for you to talk to your existing customers, reward them, engage them, upsell to them, and keep them part of your brand journey. Indeed, American Express found during their last survey that customers were willing to pay a 10% premium for excellent customer service rather than experiencing frustrations and negative emotions. I read yesterday that Google search has changed very much for people, and whilst people were used to be looking under terms of cheap, they are now looking for best. So if your search terms on the internet are about the best of something, people only want to buy the best. They're not necessarily interested in the cheapest as much as they used to be. Here's a very simple cycle for you to understand. If you want to put some love around your customers and put that at the center of what you do, obviously you're going to attract strangers. You want to engage people who've become prospects. You want to attain customers and then delight your fans. And that effectively will complete the circle and renew from there. Where do people experience your brand? I think it's worth thinking that there are a number of different touch points. From how they pick up the phone, how people and how your teams talk to people on the phone, the experience they hear, the welcome message and the audio, how they may show up at your store or in person with engagement with you, how they might be seen online on your website and the experience and the customer journey that they go through, how they've heard about you through social media. All of these areas are areas that OnBrand specialize in and that can help you get your customer messaging right and in front of the right people at the right time. Top tips, be a brand. Think about your customer, who and where and what their journey is. Identify those customers, engage your existing customers, and make it easy for them to reach you. Be in their channels. Think about where your customers are shopping. If you're not on Instagram, yet your customer shops on Instagram, then certainly you need to be in that channel. I think it's also really important that you're consistent across your marketing channels and that the message that they get is consistent from whichever channel they move to. And at the same time, test, measure, and test again. Don't be afraid to test things and learn from your experiences till you finesse exactly what your brand is doing. And don't fear failure. If you get it wrong, you're going to learn something, and you're going to learn more from that experience than by not having partaken in the first place. I'm going to cut short there and unshare my screen and allow some time, hopefully, for questions at the end. I hope that's been a quick summary for you of some of the thoughts and ideas around brand. And I'm going to hand you back to Rebecca, who's going to pick up the baton from here. Thanks, everybody.
Rebecca, you need to unmute, I think. Bottom left.
Unmute.
There you go. Done.
Brilliant. Share screen. Can everyone see that? Yes?
Yep, looks good.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you today about how you can use intellectual property, in particular registered trademarks, to protect your brand and the value associated with your brand. I've got quite a bit of material to cover, so bear with me. I'm going to canter through quite quickly, but you'll have the slides afterwards to refer back, and you can always contact me with any questions you might have.
Rebecca?
Yes?
Sorry to interrupt you. Do you want to put it on full screen for your slides?
Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you.
Better? Okay. So I'm going to look in particular at introduction to registered trademarks. What are they? Why do you need one? How do you get one? So we'll look a little bit at the clearance process. So what you should do before you launch a brand, looking at the registration process, whether it's expensive, what makes a strong trademark, and then some practical considerations around trademark use. So what is a trademark? The primary function, of course, is to identify the origin of goods and services of one business from those of another, but of course it encapsulates so much more than that. The definition is very broad, so provided it has this origin function and it can be represented on the register in a very clear, precise and self-contained way, the sky's your limit. It can have words, logos. It can also be non-traditional marks such as colours, shapes, position marks, and we'll look at a few examples of those in a minute. I wanted to just clear up a common misconception that seems to be out there, and that is that sometimes people think that if they have a domain name or a company name registration, that somehow gives you protection for a trademark, and it doesn't. These are a few examples of some non-traditional trademarks that have made it onto the register. So we've got Christian Louboutin's iconic red sole. It's a position mark. Got the Coca-Cola shape of the bottle, and then Daniel played us the MGM's Lion Roar is a trademark, and it is protected as such. Toshiba has very recently applied to and successfully registered the first moving trademark in the UK, and this is it here. It's quite short. Hope you can see that. And then McDonald's has also protected its famous jingle. I'm not going to sing it. Okay, so why do you need a registration? Well, you don't need one in order to use a trademark. However, having a registration provides a host of benefits. It provides the owner with the exclusive right to use that mark for the goods and services for which it's protected. It can provide a solid basis on which to build reputation and goodwill. This third point for me is the most beneficial, I think, to businesses, because it can make it easier to take action against infringers and cyber squatters. It can mean that you can often avoid lengthy and costly opposition proceedings and court actions. I like to think about registrations a little bit like our houses. We want to make sure that they're safe, solid, secure. We might have reinforced doors, we might have fancy alarm systems. We want to make sure that we're safe and that our valuables are safe. Having a business and not protecting your brand is a little bit like going out your house and leaving the doors and the windows open. You're making it easy for anyone to come in and take what they want. So it's a bit like having an insurance policy. Having a registration can also be a warning shot to third parties. So anyone thinking about launching a brand will often have searches done. If they see your mark on the register, they'll steer clear. And it can help trading standards, police and revenue and customs to enforce your rights on your behalf. Exploitation. You can license registrations, assign them. They're tangible assets, so they can be used as security for loans. And for me, for businesses, this next point is very important. It can help to facilitate investment. So investors, as you will know, often look to see what a business has done to protect their brand. What have they done in terms of monitoring the marketplace to stamp out infringement? What have they done in order to keep the register clear of potentially conflicting marks? Basically, what has the business done to maintain the integrity of their brand and therefore the value of that brand? So a little bit about availability searches. So before a business launches a brand, before it gets too involved or too far down the line in the design or creative process, should really be thinking about conducting adequate trademark searches to make sure that there's nothing out there that you're going to infringe. And no significant obstacles or blocks to registration. And by obstacles, I mean identical marks as well as anything that's confusingly similar. Now, there's lots of different types of searching. There's lots of degrees of thoroughness of searching, and your advisor will be able to tell you or advise you the best strategy for your business. Essentially, having searches done can avoid the cost and the expense of being on the receiving end of an infringement action, but it can also mean that you are avoiding the costs and the damage as a result of having to rebrand. So just a couple of examples of companies that have had to rebrand or use a different brand in another territory. So the World Wrestling Federation, which I'm sure most of you are probably aware of this conflict, it went on for a number of years. They were WWF, they had to rebrand to WWE because of a conflict with the World Wildlife Fund. I believe their legal fees were in excess of $1 million, and I think their estimated rebrand costs were around 35 million. Primark, I'm sure everyone knows this brand. They originated in Ireland under the name Pennies, but because of the US retailer JCPenney, they had to adopt a different brand trademark outside of Ireland. And then Burger King, we all think of Burger King as a global brand, but even Burger King had to adopt a different mark in Australia, Hungry Jack's, because of the owner of an earlier right, who coincidentally happened to be American, who married an Australian and emigrated to Australia. So how do you get one? Because of time, I know it's short, I'm not going to run through everything you need to include in your application. It's listed here. Once you have filed your application, the examiner will look to see whether the mark's inherently distinctive, whether it's descriptive, whether they need to raise objections. If everything's fine, it then gets published for what we call an opposition period. Essentially, anyone who's got an earlier right that wants to oppose or object gets that chance during this phase. If any objections have been overcome, then you get your registration certificate. In terms of timescales, you're looking at about 4 to 6 months from filing through to registration. And I've put that is, I should say, if everything goes swimmingly well. It doesn't always happen this fast. And I've put the timescale up just to show businesses how long it can take to achieve registration. And then if you're factoring in having adequate trademark searches done as well, you're looking at least between 6 months to a year. So you do need to factor that in as early as possible. Are they expensive? Well, you always have to pay a filing fee, and it really depends on the goods and services you include in your application. They are categorized into classes, clothing in one, watches in another, etc. The more classes you have, the more expensive your application will be. It will also depend on the territory. I should say, I'm sure most people are aware that trademarks are territorial. So if you apply in the UK, you're only going to have protection in the UK. You can apply nationally in most countries. There's also an international trademark registration system. There's also an EU intellectual property trademark system. And I'm happy to talk to you about those after the talk. It's quite a lot of information to cover in 15 minutes. Also, you need to factor in cost of prosecution. So that is, if any objections are encountered, you'll need to dip into your pockets then in order to overcome them. But once you've got your registration, you're good for 10 years. And you then renew it every 10 years if you want. But that isn't the end of the story, and businesses really need to have a pot of funds set aside for policing their brand. And what I mean by that is searching the register. Is there anything that is of concern? There are commercial watches that you can have that do that for you. And it means that you can potentially stamp out infringements before they happen. Often people file applications and they flag what they're about to do. Enforcement, essentially, if there is conflicting use on the marketplace, take swift action in order to maintain the integrity of your brand. So what is a strong trademark? Well, what I mean by this is, what is a legally strong trademark? Often there is a tension between what is strong from a marketing perspective and what's strong from a legal perspective. Often, and understandably, businesses choose marks that convey or speak to consumers immediately about the goods and services they're about to buy. What this means is that those marks can often be descriptive or not particularly distinctive, and it might mean, therefore, that one, it's harder to protect those marks, or two, that the owner of those marks might have to tolerate a lot of other third parties getting quite close to them, but without actually infringing them. So marks sit on a spectrum of distinctiveness. You've got descriptive marks at one end, very distinctive marks at the other. If you're at this end, at the top end of distinctiveness, you have a much broader scope of protection. Essentially, you can cast your net a lot further in order to stamp out uses that you don't like. So the greater the distinctiveness, the easier it is to protect, the greater the scope of protection. Invented words tend to provide legally the strongest trademarks. However, we're not saying to businesses, don't pick marks that are strong from a marketing perspective. What we're saying is that you might need to bear in mind that you have to have deeper funds to protect those marks, and it might be a long-term gain to actually protect what you want in the long run. So in this example up here, you've got the Body Shop in the cosmetics industry. Obviously the Body Shop's well known, but use of body is frequent in that industry. Body lotion, body butter, body scrub. If somebody was to come up with the brand Bodylicious, Body Shop, a registration for the Body Shop might not catch that. Lush, much more distinctive. If somebody came up with Lushalicious, that might be enough to catch that use. And then we've got Boots, who has no meaning in relation to cosmetics. They might be able to cast their net even wider. So what do you protect? Normally we say protect the word marks. As Daniel mentioned in his talk, brand can be a font. You might want to protect your mark that you use in a particular stylization. Where you have a combination mark, so you've got a device element and a word element in this Microsoft example, we generally say protect the elements individually because it makes it easier to tackle third parties using either of those elements. Some practical considerations now. Make sure you use your trademark as an adjective. Don't do anything that will undermine the origin function of your trademark. So for example, try and avoid saying things like Ariel will make your clothes brighter, rather use or say Ariel washing detergent will make your clothes brighter. And these are a few examples of trademarks that have been a victim of their own success. They've lost the origin function. Jacuzzi, bubble wrap, plasticine, Velcro have all lost their trademark function. If you do have a registration, you're entitled to use the R in a circle, but beware, it's a criminal offence to use it if you don't have a registration. All is not lost if you don't have a registration. You can still use the TM symbol as an indication of your trademark, that you're using it as a trademark, or that you have unregistered rights in that trademark. Non-use. If you have a registration, you need to use it within the first 5 years, or you could potentially lose it. So you need to use the mark as registered or in a form that's not too different, and make sure you're using it on the goods and services that are covered by your registration. So if your registration covers clothing, but you're only using it on watches, you're not going to be able to maintain your original registration. In terms of how different can you use your mark, how different can your mark be that you use in terms of what you have protected? Red Bull cleverly has protected not only the word Red Bull and their logo, they also protect the graphical elements that go with their packaging. There was some discussion about whether they were using that graphical element, given that they overlay the Red Bull mark on top. And yes, it was found to still be used, even though you're using other marks in conjunction with the registered mark. Bear, on the other hand, is a well-known trademark that's used in relation to children's snack foods. And they use it with a little fig leaf, and they block in the R and the B, and that was found to be too far away from their registration. So just wrapping up with some top tips, identify the important aspects of your brand. It's not necessarily the word or logos. Identify all goods and services at the outset, because you can't add in goods and services later on. Think about whether you want a legally strong mark, or if you want a mark that is stronger from a marketing perspective, just know that you need to work a bit harder, potentially, on those brands. Allow sufficient time for brand clearance. It can save time and cost in the design process. Brand evolution. If you're revamping your brand, make sure your brand protection reflects that. And then have a clear strategy for policing and enforcement. Keep evidence of your use. It's really important. Businesses often use their brands, and we want the evidence, and they know they've used it, but we don't have any records. So it's important to keep those. And if you do, unfortunately, encounter conflicts in the marketplace, do try to keep evidence of any confusion, because it can be gold dust in infringement proceedings. I'm going to wrap it up there. I hope that's been of some help. As I say, happy to take questions afterwards. We do offer free consultations, 30-minute consultations to businesses to talk about brand protection. So we're happy to do that for you, and to offer discount for Herts Chambers of Commerce members. So back to you, Donna, I think.
Thank you. That's great. If you could just come out of your slides, that'd be brilliant. Yeah. Thank you.
There you go.
Lovely. Has anybody got any questions at all that they want to ask Daniel or Rebecca? And I'm hoping I can see everyone here. Is there anyone that's got their hand up at all? Alison, can you see? I don't think I can see everyone here.
No, I can't see any questions.
Okay. I have a question actually. So if I would like to get registered trademark protection for my business, but the budget is tight, what would you recommend as an absolute minimum?
Well, it really depends on what marks you use and what the business is. But what I would say is that as a minimum, and if you've been using it for some time, I would say file for your word mark or the logo, if you have it, one for your absolute core fundamental goods and services. It may be that you just do a quick rough and ready search on the UK IPO to see if there's anything immediately obvious that would be a problem. And if not, and you don't have the money to have a full search, file the application and hopefully it will go through to registration. Okay. And one thing I didn't mention in my talk is spending a bit of money up front, you know, a few £100s up front to secure registration can stave off, you know, having to spend a lot of money later on because somebody else has registered it first and you're on the back foot.
Great. Thank you, Rebecca. Any more questions? Madeline? Oh, just unmute, Madeline. That's it.
Hi, sorry. I think this is one for Daniel, I guess. I guess when I think about sort of storytelling with the brand, generally I think of it being kind of emotive and kind of in touch with the customer. But we're in the defence space, and our tone of voice is quite sort of serious and like knowledgeable, I guess. You got any tips of kind of getting? I don't know. I still want to connect with the audience, but it's not kind of like a fun chat I wouldn't have with them.
Yeah, I think the answer probably comes from getting to know your audience and understand what motivates them. So what's going to motivate them to purchase, what's going to motivate them to engage with you, and how do you connect to them outside of a transaction? So outside of a transaction, where are you finding them? Are they following your social media? Are they engaging with you? Do they open your newsletters? What are the things that they're interested in? Is it a bit of thought leadership that needs to come maybe from your brand that actually adds value to their overall experience and how they see you? Sometimes you could be just the deliverer of the latest news in your industry, and they see value by attachment from that than necessarily you telling them about the product that you do. More than happy to have a chat offline with you and have a look at some examples of what you do, and perhaps give you some tips and pointers. Likewise to any other person here who wants any advice on their own messaging and how they're presenting.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Madeline. Anyone else want to ask a question?
I have a question for Daniel, actually. Hi, Daniel.
Hi.
I'm curious to know, I've been reading a lot. You talked about companies or brands and companies having a purpose. I think we're all seeing a lot about companies trying to have more of a purpose in societal issues, and both consumers and employees are now expecting companies to play a role in bettering their communities. And I'm wondering if through COVID, if you're seeing any of that even at the local community level, and maybe how local businesses can help this purpose-driven mission help them through this time and into the future.
No, thanks, Lisa. That's a really good question. I think what we're certainly seeing is businesses are pivoting. I think that what we've seen is that pay-per-click rates were very, very low. It was very cheap to acquire media during the early stages of COVID, when everybody kind of barred the hatches and we went into lockdown. What we're seeing now is that brands that have seized the initiative, that are out there talking more publicly and making more noise, have a real opportunity to make a big gain in market share in terms of what they do. But certainly, OnBrand, we've always felt that, having a shop in the high street, for example, has always for us been putting us as a part of the community, which is why we launched the contactless touch point for raising money for homelessness last year, because we felt our obligation, our burden of doing that and wanting to give back. I think that a lot of businesses are starting to think more about corporate social responsibility and starting to think a little bit more externally. And that's really great behavior to see. I think it has to be sincere. I think it has to be genuine, and I think it has to be relevant and related to the business or the opportunity in that sense. I don't think it's just about, a picture of a check being handed over to somebody. I think it has to run congruent to the business objective and the business ideal of where it can add value. I was approached, we have a number of shopping centre clients, and I was approached yesterday by a charity that's running workshops for young people who are primary carers for their parents or relatives, and they want to do something with music, and they want to know, could we put the music that they create through this class out into the shopping centre that was the local sponsor. And there's a good piece there where it joins up all the way through. So I hope that answers your question, Lisa.
It does. Thank you, and well done on the homeless charity that you've made so easy for all of us to donate by just walking by.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's great. Alison.
Donna, hi, thank you. Can I ask Rebecca a question, please? If we have a slogan that runs alongside our brand. Should we be protecting that as well?
Yes, if that slogan is being used in order to, in a brand sense, then yes, definitely, it's anything that speaks to consumers that they associate with your brand. But the thing with slogans is they're not always easy to protect. You always have to remember, is the trademark function being fulfilled? So do people rely on it to make a purchase, or is it just something they see as a bit of marketing blurb that goes alongside their brand? And if it's just a marketing tool, then it will be very difficult to protect. If it's actually a trademark, then you can protect it, and you should protect it. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's great. Anyone else? No?
I've got one.
Oh, go on, Alison.
Sorry,
Cool.
one more. This one's for Daniel. Sorry, Daniel. Do you distinguish between a brand and branding?
Yeah, so a brand is how you see yourself, and the business part of you building a brand, and the power and the piece that we explained about it. Branding is the exercise of effectively putting the layers around your brand. So when you're branding your website, branding social media, effectively it is the act of branding is the act of being a brand, but doing that in the right brand costume, shall we say, and ensuring that everything is consistent. And one of the things that we help businesses do is to review their brand, look at their consistency across the channels that they communicate, and does it match up? And we find this across different brands, is that you can have a brilliant experience on one touch point and then an awful one the other. We have a look at British Telecom, who are fantastically about what they're sponsoring and global and a very big sort of arms cuddling around the world brand. Yeah, if you ever have to phone the operator because you've got a problem with your phone system, it's the worst experience in the world. Or, your brand is this lovely black horse that's prancing around on TV. Yeah, your experience of sitting in a call center for 35 minutes before you have to speak to somebody is where the brand promise falls down. So we're very much on hand to help people see their brands in guise of their customer messaging. And sometimes we can provide the perspective of taking a step back, looking at how your customer sees you. And I think that's quite an important perspective.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. I think both presentations have been absolutely brilliant today. Really insightful, very useful, and very engaging. And I think when we've done countless webinars, all of us, for the last few months, it's actually nice to have one that's quite interesting and has us hooked. So thank you both very much for today. Alison, am I right in thinking you'll be sending the presentations through to everybody so that they have the slides?
Yeah, we'll do that as soon as we can. Thanks.
Smashing. Okay, well, thank you both, and if there's no more questions, we will see you again very soon. Thanks again, Daniel, and thank you, Rebecca. Have a good day, everyone, and get some sleep, David, on your lunch if this is your third webinar.
Great, thanks everybody, thanks for joining.
Thank
Okay,
you.
everyone. Bye.